The morning Simone Adeyemi boarded her flight to London, she had 2 carry-on bags, 1 check suitcase, a one-way ticket, and the bone-deep certainty that she was making a terrible mistake. She did it anyway. That was the truest thing she ever did for herself, not the courage of certainty, but the courage of doubt. She got on the plane not because she knew it would work out. She got on because staying had stopped being an option. The only direction left was forward, even if forward meant flying across the Atlantic into a city where she knew exactly 3 people and had no idea who she was going to be when she landed. She was 31. She had just ended a 5-year relationship, resigned from a career she'd spent a decade building, and sublet her Chicago apartment to a grad student named Todd who collected vintage cereal boxes and asked too many questions about water pressure. She was starting over. What she didn't account for was the man who sold her a second-hand bookshelf on her 3rd day in the city, and 6 weeks later became the reason she stopped counting days. She found the flat the way expats find most things, through a long, improbable chain of "I think I know someone." It was a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor of a Victorian conversion. High ceilings. Drafty windows. A kitchen trying its best. It smelled like old plaster and dried lavender. She loved it immediately, irrationally, the way you love things that feel like they were waiting for you. What it did not have was furniture. The previous tenant had taken everything. Even, inexplicably, the towel rail. Simone lived there on an air mattress from a corner shop, eating cereal from a paper cup, surrounded by the specific kind of silence that isn't peaceful. It's just absence. She found the bookshelf in a Facebook group called Peckham Bits and Bobs. The post read: solid oak bookshelf. 5 shelves. Good condition. Free to collector. She messaged immediately. The reply came 4 minutes later. Still available. Can you collect tomorrow? My name's Oliver. She collected it the next afternoon. She expected a brief transaction. A polite exchange. That was it. What she didn't expect was Oliver, tall, unhurried, paint on his forearms, a laugh that arrived before the joke finished, asking if she wanted tea while they figured out how to get the shelf down the stairs. She said yes. That was the beginning. Oliver Mensah was 34. The son of Ghanaian parents who moved to Peckham before he was born and never left. He'd grown up 2 streets from where he still lived. Studied architecture. Came back at 26 with a degree and the quiet understanding that he was someone who needed to be rooted. He worked as a restoration architect. He spent his days deciding which old things were worth saving and how to save them without destroying what made them worth saving in the first place. He wasn't looking for anything. He had simply put a bookshelf on Facebook. They drank tea standing in his kitchen. She had nowhere to be. He had no reason to end the conversation. They really talked about why she came to London. She told him the broad strokes. A relationship that had calcified. A career in brand strategy she excelled at and quietly despised. A version of herself she'd been performing for so long she forgot there was a self underneath it. London was a fellowship in design research. Legitimate. Purposeful. But also, honestly, an escape hatch. That's not nothing, Oliver said. Escape hatches are underrated. You think? There's a difference between running away and leaving, he said, turning his mug slowly. Running away means you haven't looked at the thing you're leaving. Leaving means you have. And you decided it wasn't for you anymore. She stared at him. I've never heard someone say that who wasn't just trying to make me feel better. I'm not trying to make you feel better, he said quietly. I think you know the difference. And I think you did the second thing. They carried the bookshelf into her flat. When they stood it against the wall, it looked right. Solid. Proportionate. Like it had always been there. That night she texted him. Thank you for the shelf. And the tea. And the thing you said. His reply came 6 minutes later. You're welcome. All 3. His name had been Daniel. She'd loved him the way you love something you've held for so long it starts to feel like part of your hand, not because it's right, but because letting go requires consciously unclenching something you stopped noticing was clenched. 5 years. They met at 26 at the kind of party where everyone is slightly too old to be there but goes anyway because Saturdays are long. He was charming. Funny. Professionally ambitious in a way that reads like passion until you realize it's competition. She loved that about him at first. She resented it later. She stayed even later than that because 5 years is a weight that takes time to lift. The end wasn't dramatic. No betrayal. No explosion. Just a Sunday morning. Gray. Quiet. Both of them reading on opposite ends of the couch. She looked up and thought. I am lonely in this room with this person. And I have been for a long time. The thought arrived fully formed. Calm. Certain. It didn't shock her. It just told the truth. She broke up with him that afternoon. He cried. She didn't. That frightened her more than anything, not that she didn't love him. She had loved him. But she'd been leaving for so long internally that the actual leaving felt like arriving somewhere she'd already been. Her therapist said, "That's grief that happened in advance. You've been mourning this for years." Simone nodded. Then she went home, applied for the fellowship, booked the flight, and started packing. What she felt wasn't sorrow. It was relief. And underneath the relief, something unnamed, the sensation of a door opening onto a room you've never been in. She texted Oliver because she needed a plumber. Then because she saw a building near the Royal College that she thought he'd find interesting. Then because his friend Kwame recommended a restaurant and she wanted his opinion even though she knew that was a thin excuse. He texted her because he found Reclaimed what he thought she might like. Then because he made too much jollof rice. Then because he happened to be near her campus and asked if she wanted coffee, phrased with the casual tone of someone who had been thinking about the question longer than the tone suggested. Coffee became a walk through Burgess Park. The walk became dinner in Brixton. Dinner became them sitting outside long after it was time to leave. "I should go," she said. "Probably," he agreed. Neither moved. She noticed things about him slowly. That he listened like he was actually listening, not waiting. That he had opinions, stated them without apology, and changed them without embarrassment. That he cooked for the pleasure of cooking. That he had a life here full, rooted, specific. He wasn't looking for someone to fill a space. He was looking for someone to add to it. And that was different. She was aware she was falling. She was aware she had a return ticket. Open-ended. Sensible. Or cowardly, depending who was judging. She was aware her track record did not inspire confidence. But awareness and certainty are not the same thing. She had spent 5 years certain. Now she was sitting on a wall in Brixton knowing, with her whole chest, that she wanted to be exactly where she was. She called her best friend Amara in Chicago. "You like him," Amara said. "I'm barely 3 months out of a 5-year relationship and I moved countries and my life is." "You like him." "It's bad timing." "It is literally never good timing," Amara said. "The only good time is when you decide it is." "I don't want to do this wrong again." A pause. "You didn't do it wrong before," Amara said softly. "You did it as right as you could. And then you recognized when it was over and had the courage to say so. That's not failure. That's growth." Another pause. "It's not bad timing. You're just scared." Simone sat with that for 2 days. On the second evening, she was at Oliver's. They were cooking. Easy. Unplanned. Comfortable. He turned from the stove. "Can I ask you something?" "Yes." "What are you going to do when the fellowship ends?" She held his gaze. "I don't know yet." "Okay." Not pressing. Not positioning. Just acknowledging. She set down her glass. "I know I'm not done here," she said quietly. "That's as far as I've got." He didn't turn around immediately. Then he said, "That's far enough." It was a Saturday in November. In London, that means darkness arrives at 4 in the afternoon like it pays rent. They spent the day at an open house for a Victorian warehouse Oliver was restoring. Massive. Derelict. The kind of building most people look at and see a problem. Oliver saw survival. He walked her through it slowly, pointing out details she would have missed: the original cornicing buried under plaster, cast iron columns hidden beneath layers of paint, the winter light cutting across the floor through high clerestory windows. "The building knows what it is," he said. "You just have to listen to it." She carried that sentence with her all day. Back at his flat, they ate leftover groundnut soup and pretended to watch a film. At some point the credits rolled and neither of them reached for the remote. The silence wasn't awkward. It was waiting. "Oliver," she said. "I know," he answered. He had always known things before she finished saying them. At first it unsettled her. Now it felt like rest. "I don't have everything figured out," she said. "I'm not asking you to. I don't want to stand outside of this anymore." Her voice was steady. "I've been standing outside of my own life for a long time. I don't want to do that here." He looked at her, slow, deliberate, the way he studied buildings before touching them. "I've been hoping you'd say that," he said quietly. "I didn't want to rush you." "You didn't." "Good." A beat. "Can I kiss you?" "Yes," she breathed. "You absolutely can." The fellowship had 6 months left. She didn't stop counting time. She wasn't reckless enough to pretend the deadline didn't exist. But she stopped counting it with dread. It became a container, not a sentence. She had conversations with herself. With her therapist over video calls. With Amara at 2 in the morning when time zones made sleep optional. She had conversations with Oliver, 2 real ones. Not conversations engineered toward a safe answer, but ones meant to actually discover something. What did she want her life to look like? What was she building here? What did London mean to her now that it had started to mean something? What she discovered surprised her. She hadn't come to London to find someone. She had come to escape herself. And somehow, she found herself instead. Not a new self. A truer one. She was skeptical of reinvention. You don't land in a new city and magically become someone else. You land with your history intact. Your fears. Your habits. Your patterns. But sometimes distance gives you clarity. Sometimes you need an ocean between you and your old life to hear yourself think. London gave her that distance. Oliver gave her the steadiness to stay in the room once she heard her own voice again. She started looking at research positions in the city. Not because Oliver was there, or not only. Because she was doing the best work of her life. Because her supervisor mentioned a potential postdoctoral opening. Because the thing she was studying, how people form attachment to places, how buildings become belonging, had never felt more alive. She was in the right city. The right building. The right room. For the first time in years, everything pointed in the same direction. She applied in February. She got the offer in March. She called Oliver before she called anyone else. There was a pause after she told him. Then he said, softly, "Do you know what a building says when it knows it's being saved?" "What?" "Nothing," he replied. "It just holds. Starting over doesn't mean blank slate. That's the myth. You don't wipe yourself clean. You carry everything with you, every mistake, every lesson, every quiet realization that took years to name. The question isn't how to leave your past behind. The question is how to carry it without letting it drive." Simone crossed the Atlantic thinking she was escaping. What she was really doing was pressure testing her own life. Chicago had been wrong in ways she couldn't articulate until she left. London gave her language. Oliver gave her steadiness. And she realized something simple. She didn't find him. She found a version of herself that was ready for him. Open. Honest. No longer so armored that she couldn't recognize kindness when it stood in front of her holding a mug of tea. She still has the bookshelf. It sits in the flat they now share in Peckham, full of a library they built together. They argued for 3 Saturdays about alphabetization. It wasn't really about books. It was about 2 lives learning how to fit on the same shelves. The grad student in Chicago still rents her apartment. She renewed his lease. As far as she can tell, she's done with return tickets. She crossed the Atlantic to start over. She didn't expect to arrive. And then she did. If this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone who's standing at their own door, trying to decide whether to leave. Follow for new stories every week, real, specific, and written for the people in the middle of their own becoming. And if you've ever booked a one-way ticket to a city, to a new chapter, to yourself, drop a comment. Tell us where you landed.